So I can't really give you a lot of solid information or a solid opinion on the race to world first for a number of reasons. Number one, I don't follow the race to world first. Like, I could not care less which guild becomes the guild that kills the boss first. That being said, though, I do know a crap ton about esports because you know how most people like to watch football or soccer or football if you're in England or rugby. I watch League of Legends. It is my main sport. It is the thing that I live for on the weekends. I watch the LPL. I watch the LCK. I watch my favorite region, of course, which is the LEC. And I never watch the LCS because who gives a fuck what NA is doing? And that's not an indictment against my American friends. That's just an indictment against the American League of Legends players. But fundamentally, it is my sport. I watch it religiously. I love it. So I know a little bit about esports. I absolutely agree with everything you said about the balancing problems because the same is happening in League of Legends. Esports in League of Legends makes it so that the meta, you see, so here's the problem. There really is no such thing as a meta in League of Legends. I'm just going to use League of Legends as an example here. There really is no such thing as a meta. The meta is going to depend on the champions that you're playing against. So if someone decides to pick Shaco in the top lane, then you picking a Skarner or you picking a Renekton into that Shaco is going to be the most unmeta pick you can make. Because Shaco is just going to wreck your shit. Because he has too many ways to get away from you. He never needs to get close to you. And it's going to be a nightmare to try and farm against him, right? Or you could use any one of a million other examples. So really, a lot of the meta is dependent on what is the other team picking and what is your exact lane counter picking, right? But sadly, because you exist in this world where the pro players pick specific champions, right? Those champions specifically become the meta for everyone, right? So suddenly, solo queue players that don't need to give a fuck about what the pro players are doing see the pro players picking. This happened a few years ago where the pro players started picking Ashe. Not a few years ago, a few months ago, pro players, supports, would start picking Ashe as a support. And then suddenly in solo queue, you start seeing bronze fucking solo queue supports picking Ashe and getting absolutely butt-fucked as a result of that pick, right? Because they don't know what the hell they're doing. And also, if you're going to pick something like Ashe support, there needs to be a lot of things that go into the team. The team needs to be built around the Ashe support in order for this shit to work, right? So fundamentally, it's just... the problem is that the pro scene oftentimes informs the lower scenes in a very unhealthy way. And I see the same thing happening in World of Warcraft. I legitimately see people running 3, 4, 5 mythic keys, like +5 mythic keys, and then having specific champion requirements. They're like, oh, we're only taking these champions, or your gear has to be like this, or this must be your spec. And it's like, bitch, please, this is a +5. This is not the World Cup, right? I know Method is only playing this build, but who gives a fuck what Method is building? This is not a Method Mythic Plus, right? Or Echo is building only this, and this is how they raid. Yes, but you're doing heroic. They were doing mythic, under-geared. You don't have to worry about what the fuck Echo was doing. If Echo, and I remember this being a bigger deal back in the day. I don't know if that's still the case. Most of you raiders will know if that still happens to you. But I remember back in the day, my guild raid members would be like, oh no, we can't do this raid like this. We have a druid, a paladin, and a priest healer, and without a shaman healer, you cannot do this raid. Method tried it. They couldn't do the raid without a shaman. You need shaman. I'm like, bro, we're not what the fuck are you talking about? We're about 35 item levels higher than Method when they tried to do this. What are you saying? No. We will never be able to do it with our current healer setup. We need the exact healer setup that Method was running. It's like, no, we don't. Because Method was trying to undergear clear the raid. We're not trying to do this. We're overgeared as far as I'm concerned. We can do it without the shaman. And it gets very annoying, right? It's very fucking annoying because you constantly see these people chasing the trains that's set up by the 1% of the player base, doing the raid in the most unnatural way possible, and then somehow that informs everyone else. So I do agree with you. I don't believe that the game should ever be balanced around the top 1% of players. I think because if you're talking about who could or could not be pissed off more brutally, how you doing, sir? Thanks for the sub. Really appreciate you. Welcome to the most degenerate chat on Twitch. Thank you. If you were to choose, who would you rather piss off? 1% of the player base or 99% of the player base? Obviously, you'd rather piss off the 1%. And here's the funny thing. No matter how you balance the game, the 1% will always find a way to exploit the game, right? Because that's what they're geared towards. That's literally all they do, is try to figure out how can they exploit the current game state. So the idea that you're even going to be able to balance the game around the top 1% is ridiculous. It's never going to be balanceable because they will find ways to break it. I'm just not sure. Do you guys feel as if Blizzard balances the game around the top 1%? Entropic, you know what? You just said one of the most important things ever. I remember when I first started YouTube, I made Warlock guides, right? That was where I started, Warlock guides. And I would spend about 3 hours a day on the target dummy. Now, a lot of normal raiders would look at me and be like, target dummy? Dude, come on. What the fuck are you doing? Why would you be on the target dummy? And it's like, well, if you want to be a mythic raider, that's where you go. Because you're testing out your rotation. You're testing out different rotations. You're trying to figure out, is there something I can do a little bit differently in order to squeeze a little bit more damage out of my spec? Maybe if I cast this spell first instead of this spell, maybe that sort of gives me the upper hand. Because I'm playing, at least at that time, I'm not playing in 1% increases. I'm playing in 0.1% increases in damage, right? Because a 0.1% increase in damage is a lot when you're already doing very good damage. But unless you're one of those players where that is even necessary, and here again, we are talking about, unless you're trying to clear the Mythic raid in the first month of the expansion being out, you're never going to be required to play at that higher level. Ever. Right? Because you're never going to get to a point where the enraged timer is going to be the thing that kills you. So a 0.1% increase in damage is no damage at all. And this perhaps needs to be said even more, and I always say this, and this was actually something that got me a lot of hate on the side of the class discords. Because I remember the Warlock class Discord would always warn people against watching my videos because I keep getting the builds wrong. And what they never understood is that when I made, for example, because I will always do 3 different builds. I would have a beginner build, a medium build, and an intermediary build, and then I would have like a extreme advanced build, right? And they would come out usually 1 week apart. But in the intermediate build, I would usually give people a build that I know they can do at their skill level. So, for example, if you have to choose between Eternal Corruption or Siphon Life, I'm going to give you Eternal Corruption or whatever it's called, the dominable corruption, or whatever the hell it's called. I can't remember the spell anymore. Or the talent anymore, but it's still a talent. You can still take it. Because at intermediary, or at intermediate, you'll be able to click the button that puts corruption on the target. But I have no reason to believe that you'll be able to keep track of all of your curses if you have to constantly reapply them, including Siphon Life. Now that got me in a lot of trouble with the class Discord, because according to them, that is the wrong build. My philosophy has always been, the best build is the one with which you can do the most damage. That's the best build. Like, there's no such thing as a base build. There is, what build gives you the most DPS? And if the build from the top raider in the world isn't that build for you, then that's not the base build. It just isn't. And then I think the other thing that a lot of people need to remember, and I know we're sort of getting into the weeds here a little, but this is something that people absolutely have to remember. Not every player will have the exact same role in every single raid group. Let me give you guys an example. As the Warlock in my raid group, I would oftentimes be more than happy to do most of the raid mechanics, because my argument was, I can dot the targets, run around, soak things, move around, soak, do whatever. I have more than enough cooldowns to stay alive. And, you know, I'm not losing too much. So my damage would almost always be a lot lower than some of the other Warlocks, because some raids have Warlocks stand in one spot and just nuke, right? Especially when Warlocks are completely overpowered. In some raids, you'll have a mage that this mage just has to stand in this one spot and just nuke. Doesn't mean that that's your job, so your build can't be the same as the guy in Echo, because that guy had the job of tanking the ads. Let's say you're a tank. Now you look at the tank in Echo, and you look at his build, and you go, oh, this is clearly the base build. Well, did you see what he was tanking? Maybe his job was to tank all of the ads, which means he's not going to have the same build as the guy that's tanking the fucking boss, is he? So you're going to... It's weird. Just pick the spec that gives you the most amount of fun in the game and the most amount of DPS that you can do. That's all that matters. If someone doesn't want you in their group, make your own fucking group and just get your own people and go do your own thing. We need people in WoW to stop caring so much about this bullshit. You know, this is the right build, that's the right build. Nonsense. Unless you're doing world first, there is no such thing. Danny, thanks for the 500 bits, sir. Really appreciate you. Danny, first and foremost, thanks for the 500 bits. Really appreciate you. Also, Kate, how you doing? I saw your name pop up. Frozen Solid, how you doing, sir? Saw your name as well. And Chris, thanks for the sub. Really appreciate you. Jim, how you doing, sir? Angel, how you doing? Just quickly want to say hello to everyone there. And then Danny, on to you. Thank you very much, dude. Yes, enjoying church very, very much. Any thoughts on if they're going to update? I think we're going to get updates to the zones in World of Warcraft. Like some of the older zones. And I think Plaguelands is going to be a part of that in Midnight. Because we already know in Midnight that we're going back to Quel'Thalas. This suggests, at least to me, that Quel'Thalas is absolutely getting an upgrade. Or a visual update. And I would assume a lot of the zones around Quel'Thalas will probably get a visual update as well. Now, with that said, it should also be pointed out that I think in The Lost Titan, we are again going to go to some of the older zones. And I think this is Blizzard's new approach, their method to upgrading and visually updating the whole world. I think for the next few World Souls, or sagas, really, I think what we're going to get is Blizzard going to all of these old zones in World of Warcraft and using us going back there as a way to visually update these old zones. So yes, I do think we can expect, I think that within the next 10 years, we will probably have a completely visually updated World of Warcraft.